He's Rich Eisen, host of NFL Game Day Morning, and, of course, the Rich Eisen Show on DirecTV, audience network that follows this one. And Rich joins us now. Hi, Rich.
DP, how are you, sir?
Well, I've got conjunctivitis.
Okay, was that sounds like the worst ever? What was that Saturday morning cartoon that sang about conjunction junction? Yeah. Yeah, Schoolhouse Rock. That's the worst Schoolhouse Rock ever, is conjunctivitis. That's the worst ever.
Yeah, so I've got that. It's not pink eye. I think it's a stronger strain of that. So it's topping Bob Costas, who had pink eye at the Olympics.
I was about to say, it's one of those sleeper conjunctivitis cells that perhaps you picked up in Sochi back in the winter, 2 winters ago, and it's just been sitting there, and it finally pops up.
No, it was last year I was in Sochi.
Yeah, no, Sochi.
Yeah. So a year ago. A year ago at this time, I'm in Sochi.
Well, Dan, I'm only here so I won't get fined. You know, I mean, what's going on over there other than your conjunctivitis, DP? What's going on over there?
Little League World Series. The Chicago Kids have lost their title.
I've heard about that.
Did you play Little League?
You know, Zan, I know. You know what? I played for just like 1 week, but because I realized early on, Dan, that for me to get where I wanted to go, I could talk about stuff. I couldn't really hit the curveball. But Zan, my oldest, is about to go into his first ever soft toss pitch league, and he has to go through tryouts next week. As a 6-year-old.
What kind of dad?
That is actually happening.
What kind of dad are you going to be?
You know what? Because he already went through T-ball, and I've done the soccer thing with him too. And I always knew that I would be at this point in my life, and I always promised I would never let anything get under my skin. That I would always just be that dad who's just going to sit there and root for him. And I've done a good job of that. For 1 full year of sports. The one time, though, that I got a little bit nuts was when we were in July 4th last year in the New England area, and Xander was going through a watermelon eating contest with the rest of the 5-year-olds. And I had no idea that I was preparing him for competitive eating his entire young life, and he nailed it. But lost out to a young girl who was deemed the winner, even though she didn't eat the watermelon all the way down to the rind. And I almost called this little girl out for cheating, Dan. I had to collect myself and realize that this was not the right thing to do in life. And I know this is a much smaller scale on what's going down in the south side of Chicago right now, but it still just does play into everything about where's the line, what do you draw, and do you call people out on it?
Yeah, but you got to be careful. It's hard to be able to step back and just let them play. But one of the hardest things I ever did as a parent is just say, all right, I'm not going to get involved. And it's hard, because you want to say something, or if there's an injustice, then you want to say something. But I'm all for survival of the fittest when it comes to this, that you earn your playing time, no participatory trophies. You get a trophy, and it stands for something. Not that, hey, we finished 4th in a league of 4.
Right. Now, but again, I'm just getting exposed to the youth sports world just because, again, my kid's just beginning to play it, my oldest. I mean, I've been at these soccer matches where there's a kid who's about a half a foot taller than mine, and everybody out there running around like Pele, scoring for a 5th, 6th time. And you just want basically say, let's pump the brakes here a little bit, because we are just 5- and 6-year-olds here. Shouldn't we be able to? This is the part of the world where we should be getting them into the joy of playing, as opposed to getting their brains beaten in. And shouldn't this kid be somehow pulled back a little bit by the coach and let others touch the soccer ball? And I never say anything, though. But I do sit there wonder, shouldn't we just pump the brakes here just a little bit?
But isn't he being punished then because you want him to pump the brakes for being great?
Well, you know what? That is the way it goes. All I know is I could understand if I am a Little League coach and I'm losing 43-2 and I think or I know the other team has a bunch of kids on it who, by letter of the law and rule that I am playing by, should not be beating my brains in 43-2, I would have a problem with that. I would absolutely have a problem with that.
Okay, but when do you say, though, Rich, that now it's full speed ahead, let survival of the fittest, that these kids are better, but they're the same age, they're going to play, your son may not. When do you do that?
But shouldn't I have the right to go then and get somebody from outside of my district to bring them into?
If you want, if you need to do that, if it makes you feel better.
But you know what I mean. So that's the whole point. It's like but as you pointed out, that there are some issues in the south side of Chicago that perhaps they don't have the same, as you said, equipment and the same opportunities, perhaps, to have as many kids there playing as other spots. So I don't know why the coaches went ahead and did what they did, or what they were busted for doing, or accused and then being busted for doing. I don't know why. I'm not going to sit here and say, do we know that they did it just because they wanted to beat everybody's brains in? Is that why it happened?
I don't know what their logic was. And, hopefully we'll hear that. But, did they push the boundaries literally because they needed to, or because they didn't think they would get caught?
I don't know that. And that's why I don't want to sit here and cast any judgment without fully knowing what happened. If they did break the rules, then somebody has to be held accountable for that.
But don't we do this? I mean, we do this in all sports, though. And, we're accusing the Patriots.
We just did this.
The Patriots doing
we just
this.
did this in the NFL.
Yes, that you're pushing the boundary. We had Dale Earnhardt Jr. on. He said, look, you got a rule book, and our job is to bend it until it doesn't break. You bend it until, you're right to the very end there and trying to get away with things. So is that what these kids the coaches are accused of or guilty of in Chicago?
Apparently it is. The only stuff that I've known is what I've read about. And it's amazing, Dan, because I remember one of the biggest stories back on the SportsCenter days when we were doing it together was Danny Almonte. Yeah. That was a huge story, because obviously it also took in a major American city, a major in New York City, in the Bronx.
The
Yankees were closely aligned, but as I also heard you and Paulie talking about driving in to work here today on the Rich Eisen show, you were talking about how he was driving the kids to the game.
Yeah,
I mean,
he was
there's
buying
a difference.
Beer. Yeah.
There's a difference between what was going on with Danny Almonte and this one. Is that there was just a larger pool of the same age-appropriate youngsters that were utilized, but it's the same rule book that everybody is pointing to say that this was done inappropriately.
He's Rich Eisen from the NFL Network, The Rich Eisen Show on DirecTV Audience Channel 239, coming up top of the hour. All quiet on the Patriots front here. Why?
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah,
I mean, this was the biggest story in America.
It was nothing, Dan. Dan.
But then have them come out and say that there's nothing, though, Rich.
Because it's under investigation. They went ahead and put it in the hands of Ted Wells, who took 3-4 months to figure out what was going on in Miami last year. The minute they handed this thing off to Ted Wells and Jeff Pash, you knew this would take weeks upon weeks. We might not hear anything until March, April. And at this point in time, I mean, here's the thing, is that New England won this Super Bowl. Many people think it was handed to them because of a handoff that didn't happen. But Tom Brady still had a record number of completions in this game. Tom Brady still had a record number of different receivers catching touchdowns for him in this game. This had nothing to do with footballs. It never did. It had to do with the team that was being accused of it. That's what this was all about. And we all rushed to judgment, although I'm not using the royal we here. The minute this happened, I said, let's pump the brakes on this. We do not know. We still do not know what footballs were deflated and by how much. The only thing we knew is it was A, under investigation, which we heard from Bob Kravitz, and B, from Chris Mortensen, that 11 of the 12 footballs were underinflated. anywhere between X number of PSI and 2 PSI. And I still, to this day, cannot tell the difference between a 10.5 and a 12.5 PSI. I defy anybody to have a football of which in each hand and figure that out. We just don't know. And we were all jumping to conclusions based on information that is still incomplete. That's why it's gone away. It's because it's much ado about, it was truly about parsing air, Dan, and nobody wants to hear about it, in my mind.
That's a special comment there.
You know, if I'd known that, we would have had the graphic for that, Dan. Do you have a special Rich Eisen special comment graphic?
Okay, what's a bigger story?
I just get a little fired up.
Brian Williams suspended for 6 months, or Jon Stewart stepping down from The Daily Show?
Oh, wow. I'm going to talk about both with Bill Carter, former Times TV reporter and author, later on in my show.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, gosh. Oh, man, because I am such a huge fan of Jon Stewart. I think he may be the best broadcaster, although I think David Letterman is number one, but Jon Stewart is right there next to him. He is spectacular and special, but when the actual true newsman is suspended for 6 months, that has to be the bigger story, because I think it also might mean, in many ways, the end of another pillar of 21st century news dissemination institutions, from newspapers to late night to evening news. This might be just the beginning of the end for another one, even though obviously it's still making a ton of money for all of the networks. I'll go with Brian Williams. Where do you stand on that, Dan?
I thought Brian would be disciplined. I had no insight into it, but I thought that they would do something. John's kind of came out of nowhere, because you got the feeling if he wanted to move on and do Letterman, he probably could have done it, decided not to. It seemed like he had found what he wanted to do, would continue to do it, but that one surprised me more. I didn't see that one coming. I knew something would come down with Brian Williams.
But, I mean, what Jon Stewart built The Daily Show into, in my mind, is just because it's on cable doesn't mean it's not on the level of The Late Show or The Tonight Show. What he did is he built that into something that was right on the same footing as network late-night television. Could you imagine what a grind that must be, 16 years to do a show like that, and then just...
It's more impressive. What he did, because he created, basically a fake news network there, and he did it 16 years ago, and all the different people who have stopped by and he's helped launch their career. That's what's amazing. I mean, David Letterman, what he did with The Late Show, obviously, stands on its own. But I thought what John did was even tougher, because he had to create something.
Especially had to also fill Craig Kilborn's shoes, Darren. Don't forget that.
All right. Who's on the show? Is Craig Kilborn on the show today?
Killer is not on the show today. Dick Vermeil. We're going to talk about, the passing of Ed Sable with him. Chandler Jones and the radio voice of the New York Yankees. We're going to talk a little bit of baseball. It is high, it is far. It is on the Rich Eisen Show. John Sterling will be on the program. All right. Chandler Jones from the Patriots and Bill Carter.
Thank you, buddy.
Phone calls.
All right. That's Rich Eisen. Thanks, bud. Rich Eisen Show coming up top of the hour.